Police are called to do a wellness check on a woman who has not responded to calls from her family. The police check the premises and hear a car running inside her garage. They open the garage door to discover the woman in question, deceased in the driver's seat. Inside the house, a typed letter is left on the kitchen counter, explaining her intentions. Law enforcement handles the scene according to protocol and reports the woman as deceased due to carbon monoxide poisoning. During the autopsy, the medical examiner noticed something odd. The woman's face was blue, and the rest of her body was pale. In cases of carbon monoxide poisoning, all the skin on the body turns a cherry red. He also found pinpoint hemorrhages in the whites of her eye, and her hyoid bone was fractured in 2 places. This woman did not succumb to carbon monoxide poisoning. She was strangled and placed in the garage post-mortem to mislead investigators. In this video, I'll explain the different techniques forensic pathologists use to find signs of a struggle, and how they are able to uncover evidence in the most unlikely places. Welcome to Dark Science. Some homicides are easy to identify, especially when the victim has clear injuries, like stab or gunshot wounds. Others are harder to recognize because the injuries are subtle, evidence has been removed, or the scene was staged to look like an accident. Accurately determining the cause of death in these cases requires strong knowledge of injury patterns and how they happen. For instance, in strangulation, the most apparent signs are bruising around the neck and the face turning a purplish blue, known as cyanosis. Cyanosis is caused by a buildup of deoxygenated blood in the face. If you tie string around the end of your finger, it first turns red. If you keep it on long enough, the red darkens until it changes a purplish blue. This is because the blood in the tip of the finger has exhausted all its oxygen stores. The appearance of deoxygenated blood through layers of tissue appears as a purplish blue. Due to constriction of blood vessels, fresh oxygenated blood cannot be pumped into the tip of the finger. The same thing happens to someone who is being strangled. Fresh blood cannot reach the head, while blood trapped above the neck becomes depleted of oxygen, till it changes dark red, giving the blue cyanotic appearance. Compression on the carotid arteries causes pressure to build up in the blood vessels of the face. This produces an engorged appearance and causes small capillaries to burst. These ruptured capillaries, called petechiae, can be seen as red dots on the face, or pin-sized hemorrhages in the whites of the eye. Forceful compression of the throat will also fracture the hyoid bone, a telltale sign of strangulation. The hyoid is a U-shaped bone located in the neck, just below the jaw and in front of the upper part of the larynx. It's called the floating bone because it's not attached to any other bones in the body. It acts as an anchor for muscles that support the tongue and larynx. Due to the hyoid being very thin and small, it's easily fractured when someone is strangled. A classic example of strangulation was reviewed in the Egyptian Journal of Forensic Science. A 42-year-old man was strangled while he was sleeping, succumbing to asphyxiation. His injury patterns included bruising around the neck, a congested and swollen face, scratches, hemorrhaging of intercostal muscles on his chest, and a fractured hyoid bone. Using the injury patterns on the victim's body, forensic pathologists were able to reconstruct the fatal assault. The attacker knelt on the victim's chest, covered his mouth and nose with their left hand, and strangled with their right. The weight of the attacker on the chest, compression of the throat, and obstruction of the nose and mouth resulted in the victim asphyxiating. In order to bring justice for the victim, it's the duty of forensics to give accurate and unbiased results to the jury, so they can make an informed decision without being affected by a narrative. This is why it is important to be aware of the biases that some sources may have when they report on a story. That's also why I use Ground News, an app and website that aggregates news from multiple sources and brings reliable and unbiased news. All I want are the straight facts, with no bend and no bias. But recently, it's been hard to judge if a story is biased or not. Thankfully, Ground News gives me tools that makes news more transparent. For example, measles has become a contentious topic, and if we compare the headlines, we'll see that it's either an overreaction or a crisis. In this article about a measles outbreak in Colorado, Ground News lays out the information so it's easy and organized. They provide the number of sources reporting it, the bias distribution of the sources, how trustworthy they are, and who owns them. Another great tool from Ground News is their blind spot feature. The blind spot highlights stories that have a disproportionate coverage from either side of the political spectrum. It helps users not miss out on important stories that they otherwise would have missed. Like this story that I almost missed, about how Trump's military parade could cost $16 million in damages and has a 73% left bias distribution. Go to ground.news/dark that you can find in my description for a better way to stay informed. Subscribe to their Vantage plan for 40% off unlimited access to worldwide coverage through my link below, or use the QR code on the screen. But know that this discount won't last. Though strangulation may have subtle injuries, there will usually be one or two obvious signs: petechiae in the face, cyanosis, or bruising on the throat. This next method is much more difficult to notice. Smothering is the act of covering the nose and mouth to induce suffocation. It involves forcefully pressing a pillow or some kind of dense fabric over the victim's face to obstruct breathing. Unlike strangulation, suffocation does not leave many signs of injury behind. The few signs of injuries that may be present are bruising inside the lips and around the mouth or nose. Cyanosis may or may not be apparent. These injury patterns can be overlooked very easily, leading to mistakenly ruling it as a natural death. This is what almost happened in the case of a woman who was suffocated by smothering. The Journal of Medical Pathology detailed the case of a 72-year-old woman who lived alone and was found deceased in her bed. There were no apparent signs of a break-in or suspicions of foul play. A standard autopsy was performed. However, concerns were later raised, and the body was refrigerated for later examination. A pathologist reviewed photos of the scene and noticed a small amount of blood on the victim's pillow. The victim's nose was also deviated, and the upper lip was pushed upward, indicating possible injuries from pressure being placed on the face. A medical legal autopsy was performed, revealing extensive bruising inside the victim's mouth and underneath the upper lip. These pathological findings indicated the victim was indeed smothered. No information was given on the status of the case. In addition to recognizing injury patterns on the body, another important factor to consider in forensics is scene-to-body correlation. Scene-to-body correlation makes sure the injuries and postmortem changes on the decedent matches with the findings and physical evidence at the scene. Such things one would look for is the positioning of the body, any postmortem wounds from moving the corpse, and bloodstain patterns. This is crucial, as suspects may try to manipulate a scene to hide evidence of a crime. One example of scene-to-body correlation is livor mortis mismatch. Livor mortis is the natural pooling of blood in the body after death, and takes about 3 hours to set in. Blood pools downward due to gravity based on the orientation of the body. If a victim dies on their left side, blood will pool along the left side of their body. If they are on their back, blood appears along their back. This pooling will appear uniform or blotchy, with a purplish-red color. If the body is found in a different position than how livor mortis appears, investigators will know the victim was moved several hours after dying. Another metric to estimate time post-mortem is called algor mortis. Algor mortis in Latin means cold death, and refers to the natural cooling of the body post-mortem. Once deceased, the body does not maintain heat, and begins to equilibrate with the ambient temperature. On average, body temperature decreases by about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit per hour. However, this rate can vary depending on environmental conditions, body size, clothing, and location. By measuring the body's core temperature, typically taken rectally or in the liver during an autopsy, one can make a rough estimate of how long the person has been deceased. If a body is found with a core temperature of 89 degrees Fahrenheit and the average living body temperature is 98.6, the estimated time since death would be around 6 hours. However, algor mortis is not a magic bullet. It's only useful within the first 24 hours, as the body equilibrates with the surrounding environment, making temperature-based estimations unreliable. Additionally, a variety of factors can influence the rate of cooling, including the body type and environmental conditions. Individuals with a higher muscle mass or greater body fat may retain heat longer than those with a leaner physique. Likewise, a body left outdoors in cold weather will cool more rapidly than one found indoors. These variables must be carefully considered when using algor mortis to estimate the post-mortem interval. Despite its limitations, algor mortis has been used to assess the credibility of suspect statements and reconstruct timelines. By using algor mortis, police were able to determine false reporting by parents in the murder of 3-year-old Nava Baker. Nava Baker's mother, Tatiana, and her partner, DeMarco Jackson, were implicated in child abuse that led to her death. On the night Nava passed, Tatiana Baker began hitting her daughter with a belt as a form of discipline. Believing Nava did not respond as expected, DeMarco Jackson picked Nava up by her arm and punched her in the abdomen until she went unconscious. Tatiana and DeMarco then waited several hours before calling 911. When DeMarco called for an ambulance, he reported Nava had just went unconscious and said he was performing CPR on her. When EMTs arrived, they measured Nava's rectal temperature and found her body temp was less than 90 degrees Fahrenheit. This indicated Nava had been deceased for at least 6 hours, and that DeMarco and Tatiana were lying to police. Both were later convicted of murder. While liver and algor mortis are useful for estimating time of death, they have a very short window. When timelines turn into days, weeks, or even months, pathologists turn to forensic entomology. Forensic entomology is the study of the types of insects commonly found on cadavers, and how insect assemblages change with decomposition. By studying what insects are present on a cadaver, investigators can roughly determine how long the body was there, and possibly time of passing. The first insect that appears around fresh corpses are blowflies, or Calliphoridae. Blowflies are attracted to the body fluids and gases that are produced during initial decomposition. Blowflies are very important because they lay their eggs in corpses 2 days after death has occurred. This helps set up an early timeline for investigators. The cheese skipper, or Pyophila casey, is another insect that has an important presence, this time during late-stage decomposition. Cheese skippers look for protein-rich environments where complex proteins are broken down into simple amino acids for their larvae to consume. Cheese skippers will lay eggs in cured meats, fish, and cheese, where enzymatic processes break down proteins. It's this reason that cheese skippers are attracted to bodies in late-stage decomposition. Around 3 to 6 months into decomposing, proteins in organs, skin, and muscles start to break down from bacterial enzymes. When cheese skippers show up on a corpse, it gives investigators a 3 to 6 month window after the victim died. What if a corpse is discovered in the woods with early signs of decomposition, but no insects, eggs, or larvae present? This indicates the body was stored or sealed in a separate location, and then dumped in the woods where it was quickly found. Finally, one of the most common ways a perpetrator may try to hide a murder is by dumping the body in water. This may be done to destroy evidence or mimic drowning. However, depending on how quickly the body is found and how much it has decomposed, forensic pathologists can determine whether the person actually drowned or was placed there post-mortem. One of the first signs a pathologist will look for in a genuine drowning is if the lungs are overinflated. When someone cannot resurface from underwater, they instinctually hold their breath as long as they can. Once their oxygen supply runs out, their mouth opens, due to reflex or passing out. Water rushes in, fills the lungs, and the body sinks. The body will later resurface from buildup of gases due to bacterial growth. If the lungs are not overinflated, this leans toward the body being dumped post-mortem. Foaming in the nose and mouth is another sign a pathologist will look for in a genuine drowning. Air sacs in your lungs, called alveoli, are coated in a surfactant made of lipids and proteins. This surfactant reduces surface tension, allowing alveoli to expand and contract during breathing. When water fills the lungs, it mixes with this surfactant, creating a frothy foam that expands out of the nose and mouth. The appearance of this foam is called a foam cone. If there is no foam present, it's another suspicion that the body may have been dumped. One of the most interesting techniques pathologists use to verify a genuine drowning is by looking for microorganisms. However, they don't just look for any kind of microbe. They look for diatoms in lung tissue. Diatoms are an aquatic microalgae that are naturally found in oceans, lakes, ponds, rivers, and streams. They have a very distinct geometrical appearance. When someone drowns in a natural body of water, these microalgae will end up in the lungs when water fills them. Tissue samples are extracted from the lungs and tested for diatom DNA, and also verified using microscopes. A water sample is also taken from the same body of water that the victim was found in, and compared to the concentration in the lung sample. If the water sample has a high concentration of diatoms and the victim's lungs does not, it raises suspicions that the victim was placed in the water post-mortem. In forensics, death can sometimes be deceiving. Beneath every staged scene and fabricated story, the body keeps its own account. Through careful examination and a cache of techniques, one can reveal the signs of a struggle, and eventually the truth comes out.